I'm still a little bit amazed that somehow 12 years after Silent Hill Downpour, and about that long since I started this YouTube channel, we finally have a new game in the Silent Hill series. It has been a long period of ups and downs for the fictional town, one that begins in different places depending on who you ask. But regardless, it's clear a new game is long overdue, though it's likely none of us expected it to be a short standalone free experience. Opinions online are of course varied. For myself, my expectations immediately changed once I heard the word free. I am a thrifter. I shop cheap, I wait for games to go on sale, and I love a free experience, and particularly for a game like this, which definitely has more expenses than your average free game on itch.io. I'm still a little shocked Silent Hill: The Short Message just dropped for free. Why did they do it? I think it's because it's been 12 long years. Kids who were really little in 2012 are now teenagers. They haven't been around for a release of Silent Hill. They may barely know what it is. Putting the game out for free incentivizes more people to play it and makes it more accessible to the generation least likely to have money, teenagers. Add to the fact that the scenario, characters, and themes are all aimed at teens. I really think this game was made to introduce the youngest generation, who have no fond memories of Silent Hill, to that haunted town. Of course, the game has some weaknesses, and they all basically go back to the fact that it's free. There are barely any interactable portions or puzzles. It's almost but not quite a walking simulator. There are no other characters to talk to, no more than one monster that hunts you, and there's no combat, just running mechanics. All of it feels streamlined to be the cheapest possible option. Only one monster means only one set of motions and animations to create. Chase scenes means they don't have to program combat, and so on and so forth. Using real actors rather than animated cutscenes, having the characters revisit the same level over multiple sections. All these are cost-cutting measures, and are totally understandable because the game is free. It feels weird because this should be a demo to advertise a game, but it's more like a short free game to advertise a series and its atmosphere to people who grew up without it. Silent Hill 2 Remake is meant to pull in my generation, the older folks who've been around for the series and are nostalgic for the older games. Short Message is for the youth. The youth aspect is also probably why the game has those warnings slapped on it, and some have made fun of how much the warnings are shoved in your face. But remember, in Japan, games have some strict oversight they have to undergo before they're approved for sale, and violence in children are two big no-nos. The first Silent Hill had to remove their child monster. Silent Hill Homecoming was cancelled in Japan, assumably because it was too violent. I'm not surprised the dev team decided to play it safe and be really cautious with their game about teens. But it's not lacking in depth for those of us who've been around the block. There are so many references and elements pulled from the series as a whole that the game feels like a love letter to the series. To begin with, the narrative is about a young girl and her abusive mother. A modern reimagining of Alessa and Dahlia. The school desk with cruel writing is pulled directly from the first game. The repression of memory, seeing your own corpse, a monster created from the main character's guilt. That's Silent Hill 2 all the way. The monster itself draws inspiration from the art that exists in the game. Like James seeing a painting and imagining Pyramid Head, our main character sees graffiti drawn by her friend and begins to see a cherry tree monster. Art creates the image in the mind, and the mind creates the monster. There's also a book in the library called Still Waiting for You. Then there's the rebirth, dying and coming back, like in Silent Hill 3. Something that's implied in Voltiel, and the way he often drags Heather away after she dies. Of course, unlike in 3, the game allows our protagonist to know she's dying, which is what sold me on this game. The horror of being trapped and having to re-experience your own death over and over. This made me wish this was a full experience, that we were going to dive deeper into that horrific idea. During these rebirths, Anita's eyes glow red, similar to previous games in which the power of the town, or whatever you want to call the force that creates Silent Hill, glows red. The save points, the aura around Pyramid Head. That same power seems to be related to the rebirth element here, perhaps implying the same power source that fuels the monsters fuels the immortality of the characters trapped there. The existence of the chase scenes and inability to fight back is very Shattered Memories. And even more than that, the way the chase scenes work is very Downpour. The dropping gates, the shifting labyrinth, having to accomplish something in the area to make your escape possible. Of course, using the phone feels very Shattered Memories too. There's even some PT in there with its repeating scenarios and looping hallways. But the game that gets the most love in this short story is definitely Silent Hill 4. It's odd when you think about it. It's not the most popular of the series, and it's in fact the least popular in Japan if you consider fan feedback during its original release. Of the original 4, it's definitely the least popular among the larger fan base, so why was this game the most referenced? Take a look at the game's credits, and you'll see why. They're a little confusing because it lists multiple companies and different directors involved. The top director-producer named is Okamoto Motoi, who is the general producer of the Silent Hill series, and I think that's the role being referenced here. Keep looking, and underneath Game Development Konami, you'll see Director, Sugimoto Atsushi. If you've watched my videos about the making of Silent Hill, or you know the history already, you might recognize that name. He was in charge of drama animation for Silent Hill 4: The Room, and has apparently been at Konami since the late 90s. He was the man in charge of the cutscene team, himself and 2 other artists, who designed and created all the in-game cutscenes and trailers of Silent Hill 4. Those just happen to be, in my opinion, one of the strongest elements of the game. As a project that struggled with a small budget, small team, and a short time frame for development, Silent Hill 4 has quite a few weaknesses, but visual aesthetic is not one of them. The incredible trailers, one your typical short trailer, the other a long 9-minute commercial that is mind-blowing all on its own, were the works of Sugimoto and his teammates, Sakamoto Atsushi and Kanamori Shiro, both of whom apparently left Konami after Silent Hill 4. Sugimoto has remained at Konami. His next project was working on the CG movies of Castlevania Chronicles for PSP in 2008. Alongside Silent Hill 4 alums Hara Naomi and Murakami Takahide. His name is listed first on the credits, similar to the style of Silent Hill 4, which may imply he led this team as well. His 2 leadership roles must have gone well, as he got a promotion to art director for 2012's Never Dead, a PS3 and Xbox third-person shooter set in a demonic world with a unique twist. The main character is immortal. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have done well, but the art is beautiful. His English credits end here, but he didn't stop working. He was still making games for Konami through the 2010s. In 2013, he worked on a game in the Tokimeki Memorial series, a visual novel and dating sim. Using a program called Live 2D, the team turned the flat 2D sprites into moving and talking figures. He's also worked with Konami Animation, a division that seems to focus on anime, TV, and film. He's also drawn a lot of art for Konami's series, including comics for Silent Hill and Contra. And of course, Silent Hill: The Short Message. If the leaked information from some time ago is correct, this has likely been in the making in some form since 2020, which accounts for the last few years of Sugimoto's working life. As a returning Silent Hill team veteran, the man has brought many of the series' staples into the modern day, but he also hasn't forgotten the past, or the game he worked on all those years ago. Silent Hill 4 is the lifeblood of Short Message. Both are in first person, unlike most of the Silent Hill series. The main character, Anita, awakens beneath a hole drawn on a wall. Not a real hole, just a drawing, which grows as the player continues the story. It mimics the holes in Henry's apartment, which also grow and change as he explores, acting as a measure of how twisted the world has become. This hole also ties into the main character's narrative in a nasty twist, when we learn this small room is really her childhood prison. That too feels very Silent Hill 4. The theme of imprisonment, being trapped in a small space, like the apartment or the water prison, is very similar. You are trapped in an apartment building running from an immortal enemy, also pretty familiar. And to escape, you have to face your past and unravel the memories that chain you here. The player has to navigate a labyrinth while being chased, to find photographs that bring to mind memories of the girl's deceased friend. Each time they do, a chain on the door leading outside is removed. A door covered in chains. That one's an obvious reference. But the subtler one is the labyrinth and the items being found. To finish Silent Hill 4, the player must navigate the Nightmare apartment building and find a certain number of body bags containing Walter's memories. Each one found plays an audio file, a memory from Walter's birth, representing his trauma. Each one also removes a chain from the super's door, allowing Henry to enter and obtain the item needed to face Walter. Short Message does the same thing, reimagining the labyrinth and the memories for our new narrative. Tsujimoto Atsushi is not the only returning team member. The big ones are well known: Yamaoka Akira and Ito Masahiro. You may also recognize Jeremy Blaustein, a translator who was heavily involved in Silent Hill 2 and also worked on 3 and 4. But there are lesser-known names that might be returning Silent Hill vets too. Underneath the Game Dev Konami section of credits, you'll see the motion capture advisor is Kurita Yukito, and the mocap engineers Ito Iichi and Sato Hiroki. And Ito Iichi worked on Silent Hill 2 Restless Dreams for the Xbox as an item designer and modeler, and Sato Hiroki worked as event programmer for Silent Hill 3. Kurita Yukito, if it is the same person, had an even bigger role. He was part of Sato Work, the group of artists working under Sato Takayoshi on Silent Hill 2. They were the team who turned the mocap into cutscenes, creating all the pre-rendered videos for the game. For Short Message, Kurita would oversee the mocap and act as the lead animator. Tsujimoto isn't the only Silent Hill 4 figure in these credits either. Ogura Chieko's name appears in the credits, receiving a special thanks. She was one of the character designers of 4, and she also worked on room design for Silent Hill 2. This game may be the closest we ever get to a reunion of the so-called Team Silent, as it brings together at least 7 people who worked on the original games, yet I feel a lot of people are overlooking this game when it's the game they've been asking for, a Japanese game made by original members of the Silent Hill team. The game is obviously different. Times change and nothing can stay the same forever. Many of its weaker elements are due to cost restraints, since the game is free. And since it is aimed at teens, the older audience used to far darker narratives in Silent Hill might be disappointed. But while it's fair to say a game didn't appeal to you, it's another to decide it's simply not good because it's not made for you. I think the game is very necessary in the world today, in which bullying has gotten far worse and far easier to pull off, especially for teenagers. And Silent Hill is attempting to do something very good, to encourage teens to reach out for each other. Of course, a major complaint is the Silent Hill thing. The fact that it's not in Silent Hill, and the reason given for that is COVID. I laughed aloud when that happened. Not because it was funny, but because I knew why it was there, and that was funny to me. Ever since Silent Hill 2, the team behind the series has wanted to expand the location of the game to more than the town. It was supposed to be a small, failing tourist town, which limited what the team could do with it. In 3, they had the game open in another town, so they could include a mall and an office building and a subway, things they thought wouldn't fit in Silent Hill. In 4, they gave up on the town almost entirely. The game is about Silent Hill, but you only explore its edges and see how it's affected the areas around the town. The game is about a haunted place, but limiting the series, which is limited in almost no other way, containing few long-running plot threads, characters, or even game elements, limits what the team can do. They have always felt restrained by it, and struggled to come up with ways to stretch it and make it work. They're done stretching and making it work. This note is the team behind Silent Hill saying, screw it. Silent Hill everywhere now. Silent Hill in Germany, Silent Hill in Japan. Silent Hill can be in Centralia, Pennsylvania. Why not? Yes, it does remove the series from some of what makes it interesting, but having the game set in another country does not negate the possibility of the town appearing or its threads spreading. This is fiction. Anything can happen. Perhaps these foggy haunted places across the world are connected. Perhaps every haunted locale leads to Silent Hill. Maybe cultists have moved, like those in Homecoming. Maybe other haunted places have had similar tragedies. Whatever the answer they come up with, the excuse is just that, an excuse to allow the teams creative freedom to do as they wish, and more power to them. All I want is fun, interesting horror experiences, and I think you can tell a Silent Hill story in any setting. I want to talk a little more about what's going on in this game, since I think it does have deeper meaning to it that's being missed by most of the audience. That's in part because I think the meaning is easiest to notice if you're Japanese, because it pulls on the country's history and the history of its creative people. The game opens with a discussion about individualism, about how it is a weakness to admit to needing others and wanting to belong. It is much braver and better to be alone and lonely, it is implied. And in the long run, that means it is better to be alone and die alone, maybe even by your own hand in misery rather than live. When you consider the longer narrative of the story, that seems to be the through line. Connect that to the dialogue from Maya, the artist. She's bullied, she may be pregnant, she was in love and her parents separated her from her beloved. Then she is hurt by a close friend and feels she's at the end of her rope. Not only because of the pain, but because of an ideal, a narrative she's written in her head. She admires cherry blossoms. They're beautiful, and only bloom for a short while. In Japan, they are a powerful symbol that appears constantly in books, film, anime, you name it, often as a symbol of the shortness and beauty of life. They're associated with school and the end of the school year because of the time of year they bloom. The girl, the artist, wants to bloom beautifully and then fall, rather than fade into obscurity. She's afraid of what it means to not be beautiful, to not be loved, to not be wanted. She is afraid to be alone. A major item of the story is a book, given to Anita by Maya, and the way Maya talks about it seems to imply it's a dark, sad book about an author who may have died young, possibly by his own hand. Unfortunately, this has happened in Japanese literary history so often, there's more than one person this book could be referencing. The most famous is probably Dazai Osamu, who wrote a book, vaguely autobiographical, but written as if it were fiction, about a miserable human being and his struggles to be his true self. The book, No Longer Human, is a tragic look into depression and abuse, and the author himself took his own life not long after its publication. Mishima Yukio is somewhat famous for his death by the sword, killing himself during a failed attempt at a coup during the World War II era. He was a complicated, troubled man who may have been attempting to create a meaningful way for him to die. His own semi-autobiographical work, Confessions of a Mask, about a repressed gay man struggling with his obsession with and fear of violence, feels very much like an explanation of his downward spiral. In fact, more than 50 Japanese authors have died this way since 1900, including some of the nation's most famous, including Akutagawa Ryunosuke and Kawabata Yasunari. A few of these men were also friends who died shortly after one another, influenced by suffering and loss to end their own lives. Here we see a young girl following a similar path as these poor souls, artists driven to create, who express themselves in art in a way they can't in real life, who struggle with their fellow humans just to exist. And in the end, they end it, often at the prime of their life, sometimes after finishing the creation of a work of art, as if their life no longer had any meaning once the art was done. Maya wants to create the perfect work of art and then end it, because she cannot see a future in which she is able to continue to create and be appreciated, because she is bullied and lonely and afraid, because it is better to die alone than suffer with others. Though this game is set in Germany, there are some Japanese elements here. We learn there is a witch of the Far East who once lived here, who formerly influenced the powerful and helped grow the town's economy. It might sound a little wacky, but it's based on real history too. During Japan's bubble economy, a woman named Onoe Nui, the Dark Lady of Osaka, managed to get her hands on a ton of cash with a little forgery, and started investing in the stock market to great success. Word spread, and she began giving others predictions about the market, performing occult ceremonies, and using a ceramic toad to divine the future. The Dark Lady worked with high-profile figures until the economic bubble burst. She lost her fortune, and her fraud was eventually uncovered. She went from being a figure of magic and power to being in jail pretty quick. The figure of the witch, Maya's ancestor is certainly one of the sources of Maya's anxiety. She rose to fame and success, only for things to turn and her life to end in infamy. Maya fears that downward spiral. Better to die before it begins. Maya has already passed by the events of the game, but Anita has somehow found her way to Silent Hill, where her attempts to die have been halted by the power of the town. She is told to find it by the Maya in her texts, and it's ambiguous what the it is. It becomes clear when you consider the themes of the game. She's trapped in this loop, restarting every time she tries to take her life. Uncovering memories helps, but it doesn't set her free. On the rooftop, things change and the past is swept away. Only when Maya falls back from the edge, having chosen to read the messages in her phone, having chosen not to die. Maya is telling her to find it, a reason, any reason to live. And in this short message, just a little sign that a friend is reaching out, Anita manages to find it. I've seen some say the ending is silly. Why would this save anyone's life? To them I say, you have no idea the silly things that can save you when you are in that deep dark pit.